Have you ever tried to read the Bible but failed? Or maybe you wanted to get a general overview of the Bible, get the big picture of what it's all about, but you didn't feel like you had the time or the endurance to tackle this, well, quite frankly, very large book. Or maybe it's just intimidating. I'm here to help you. My name is Sherry, and I welcome you to You, Me, and the Word. Yes, the Bible is all of those things and much more. It's also a story about God and God's creation. Once you know that story, the main plot, the other parts start to fall into place. The better you know it, the more you will see your own story in it. This is the first video in a series to introduce you to the story of the Bible, from Genesis, the first book, to Revelation, the last. In other words, from the first to the last. It's an overview or a condensed version, so we won't be getting into the details. But within this story are lots of little stories which connect to each other. And we start in the book of Genesis, which is a word that simply means beginning. This book has lots of important stories that create the foundation for the whole Bible. They will be referenced both clearly and subtly over and over again, so it's important that you are familiar with them. Are these stories true? You may be asking yourself or asking me. Well, theologians have debated that question for quite literally thousands of years. And I'm not going to answer it. What I will tell you is that the Bible is not a history book or a science textbook, and those kinds of things are not its primary purpose. So if you are expecting a history book or a science book, if you're expecting everything to just work out that way, you will be disappointed. No, instead, its purpose is to help us to know God and God's relationship to humanity and the universe, or creation. We begin with the creation, the origin of all things. Are you ready? Here we go. The first lines of the Bible are a poem. I will read you the first few sentences. So as we look at it, remember, poem. It was not intended, it was never intended to be taken literally. Once upon a time, or as it is written in the first phrase of the Bible, in the beginning. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. And then the creation unfolds, one thing building upon another, not in a random, haphazard way, but in a systematic and orderly way. God adds to the creation with land, plants, the creation of linear time as we know it, animals, and then humanity. Each section or stanza ends with the phrase, "And there was evening, and there was morning," on each numbered day. Then after a couple of stanzas, there's an addition to this refrain. "And God saw that it was good, and there was evening, and there was morning." Then on the sixth day, God created humanity in God's own image. Male and female, God created them. God gave humanity responsibility for caring for the creation. God looked at everything and saw that it was not just good, it was very good. And on the seventh day, after all of that, God rested. So we've reached the end of the poem and the end of chapter 1. Creation is complete. But wait, there's more. A whole other creation story. You might be thinking, wait, what? Another creation story? How can that be? It's something that can cause people a lot of argument and confusion. And it doesn't not have to be confusing or start any arguments. Think of the first part as a poetic overview. The second gets very personal and specific, namely in the persons of Adam and Eve. The first part was far removed. God speaks and it happens. In part 2, so to speak, God gets his hands dirty, literally. God forms humanity from the dust or dirt of the ground. You could think of it like making a clay figure. God breathed into it, literally giving it the breath of life. This is the first human, Adam. This word in Hebrew also simply means man or humanity. It can refer to the name of the first man, Adam. It also sounds a lot like the Hebrew word for the ground, dirt, earth, Adamah. God makes a garden, the Garden of Eden, and he puts Adam in it to take care of it. God tells the man that he can eat anything in the garden except for one particular tree, named the knowledge of good and evil. If he eats from that tree, he will die. But God doesn't want the man to be all alone. So God has Adam look at all of the animals that God created to see if there is one that could be his companion, his helper. But he doesn't find anything that really fits. So God creates woman to fulfill that role. And you might look at that concept with your modern eyes in this English translation, especially if you're a woman, and you might be appalled. Woman described as a helper, merely a helper, you might think. And in some English translations, it uses that phrase, helpmeet. What does that even mean? We see being a helper as meaningless, being less than, but we shouldn't. You want to know why? Every other place where this Hebrew word is used in the Old Testament is describing God, Ezer. When we need the help of God. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that women should be equated on a level with God. It merely illustrates that being a helper does not imply a lower status or less important. And there's another word here. And I'm having trouble pronouncing it. Kenegdo. 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 Together with Ezer, we can arrive at a meaning of life-saving counterpart that is desperately needed. In other words, woman was vitally needed in order for the man to accomplish the task that God had given him. We have these two people, and the Bible makes a curious statement. They were both naked, but they felt no shame. There's no explanation about this phrase. The statement stands alone as the story continues. I point it out because even though it appears irrelevant here, it's going to become important later. I've gone in a bit more detail with today's story than I normally will, but this is the foundational story of the Bible. It is so important to have a grasp on these details. Now, man and woman are in the garden, hereafter referred to as Adam and Eve. Adam and his Ezer Kenegdo, his life-saving, desperately needed helper and counterpart, the one who is described as God is described in other parts of the Bible. A new creature appears in the garden. It doesn't have a name, but you may have already heard of it: the snake. The snake appears in this garden of paradise, and it starts talking to the woman. It's tricky, and he asks her a question. He says, did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden? Eve does what she was created to do. She helps the snake by correcting his, obvious misunderstanding. She says, no, they're allowed to eat from any of the trees in the garden, except for one. If they eat from it, they will die. In fact, they shouldn't even touch it. And that goes a bit beyond God's instruction, but I'll leave that there for today. Understand that no matter how lightly or in depth I take you on any of these stories, I can always take you deeper. But in this series, we need to keep moving forward. Like I said, Eve is fulfilling her created role in helping the snake, correcting its error. She has no pretense, no shame. She's not wary or guarded. She trusts everything that God has told her, or she has been told about God, without question. She has had no need to question. But the snake introduces doubt. Is God keeping something good from her? Has God been deceitful? She looks at the tree and examines the fruit. It looks okay to her. Could it be that God is keeping something good from her? The snake says that if she and Adam eat this fruit, they will become like God. Could God be keeping something else good from them? Is being like God good? That's a hard question to answer. Earlier, the Bible said that humanity was made in God's image, but there is a chasm of difference between that and being like God, or in fact, being a God. Maybe a better question is, can humans handle being like God? Anyway, the snake is suggesting that God is trying to keep something good and beneficial from them. God is not to be trusted. And Eve, being the trusting helper, believes the snake in front of her and her own powers of perception, rather than continuing to believe and trust in God. This is one of the things that has stayed with humanity through the ages. The idea that through God's laws, commands, direction, that God is trying to keep something from you. Things like fun or freedom or whatever it is you want to do at any given moment. The average person does not consider that. On the contrary, God may be trying to give something good to you, that God may want to protect you from something terrible that actually takes away your freedom. Remember that no matter how smart you are, no matter how good your powers of perception are, you cannot see the big picture the way that God can. God, as the one who created the universe, created time, and stands outside of it, can see everything. When you can't understand why God says, don't eat the fruit off that tree, even though it looks just fine, consider that maybe, just maybe, God knows something you don't. That God may be giving you a greater gift by saying no to what looks great and beneficial to you. So Eve decides that the fruit is good to eat. She can eat anything else in the garden, but now she has to have that fruit, the forbidden fruit. We hear a lot about Eve in the story, but where is Adam? Is he in some other part of the garden while Eve has this extraordinary conversation with the snake and so is unable to warn her off? Well, when it comes time to eat the fruit, it says that Adam was with her. Adam was with her. All of this happened, and he didn't say a word. So they eat the fruit. And no, they don't instantly drop dead, but now they are aware of their nakedness, their vulnerability. They are ashamed. They want to protect themselves, to cover up. They are now afraid of God and hide from God. They who did not know fear or shame, who were totally free to be and think and live, now know both fear and shame. Life as they have known it is over. The totally free and trusting relationship that they had with God is gone, replaced with fear and suspicion on the part of humans. This is another thing that has stayed with us through the ages. In the evening, God is walking in the garden, looking for Adam and Eve, but they are hiding because they are afraid. And God asks the question that every parent has asked a small child, already knowing the answer: have you done the one thing that I told you not to do? Adam makes excuses, saying, it's the woman's fault, this woman that you put here with me. In fact, Adam may be blaming God. Eve blames the snake who tricked her, and the snake says nothing. Then God explains to Adam and Eve and the snake the consequences of their actions. These are the consequences of a broken relationship with God. They are banished. Instead of tending God's garden, they will have to grow their own food. This perfectly suited pair no longer trusts each other. There is a new power dynamic between them. Snakes are given their punishment too, and one day one of Eve's descendants will crush the head of the snake. And that's more than a consequence for the snake. It's a promise that will come up much later in the story. All of this has followed us down the ages. It is part of the human condition. We want to make our own rules that even we don't follow. We don't trust God. We think God is trying to keep good things from us rather than give good things to us. We don't trust each other. We're always playing the blame game, blaming God or others when we get caught doing something we shouldn't. All of that does not keep God from loving us. Despite all of this, he still takes care of Adam and Eve, providing the clothing they will need to live in this new reality. So Adam and Eve move out of the Garden of Eden and into their new lives, and they start a family. They will have 2 sons, Cain and Abel, and that's where we will pick up next time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you want to continue on this journey, click the subscribe button to be notified when a new video comes out. That's all for this time. I'll see you again soon.